StoryCon presents Backstory, a podcast featuring writers, readers, and their stories, hosted by best-selling author Jennifer A. Nielsen.
Welcome to the Backstory podcast. We are so glad that you are here and so excited about today's guest, Amber McBride. She is an award-winning author and poet who writes for children and adults, often referring to herself as a folklorist. She is also an herbalist and practices hoodoo, which is an African-American folk magic practice. McBride was an assistant professor for a decade at the University of Virginia and James Madison University before she started writing full-time. Amber McBride's poetry has been published in several literary magazines, including Plowshares, Blackbird, Willow Springs Magazine, On Being, Rust and Moth, and many others. Her debut young adult novel, Me, Moth, was a finalist for the National Book Award and won the 2022 Coretta Scott King John Steptoe Award for New Talent, among many other accolades. Her sophomore novel, We Are All So Good at Smiling, was critically acclaimed, garnering 5-starred reviews. Amber McBride's middle grade debut, Gone Wolf, was also well received and went on to win the LA Times Book Award in Children's Literature. Her adult poetry collection, Thick with Trouble, was called a beautiful web of interconnected pieces relating to her identity as a Black woman in the modern era by Harvard Crimson. Amber McBride earned her MFA with a concentration in poetry from Emerson College in Boston and went on to intern at the Furious Flower Poetry Center, where she helped to put on programs honoring Black poets and writers like Toni Morrison and Maya Angelou. Amber McBride believes in magic, hoodoo, ghosts, and all things you cannot see. But most of all, she believes in you. Welcome to the Backstory podcast, Amber McBride.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. That's quite an introduction.
It is. It is quite an introduction, and all things you have done in this very compact window of time. I think that's what is so amazing to me is your debut novel. So Me, Moth, was that 2021?
2021, August of 2021 it came out, yes.
All right, right in the middle of COVID, near tail end. And all right, what was that like to have to be a debut author in that weird time for us?
It was such I think that you think of your debut, right? And you're like, I'm going to go to bookstores and it's going to be great and it's going to be so interactive, but it was so online. My debut events were online, everything. And there was a real fear that how am I going to reach readers? How are people going to see my work? But I think that we were far enough into the pandemic that we had gotten that let's do things virtually down. It's like so many virtual events. That's something I do miss. It would be like you could be having dinner and you'd be like, who's having a virtual book event today? And you could just watch it during your dinner. It was so nice that we had access to so many virtual things, but it was very, very nerve-wracking. But I was really lucky. My debut or my launch event was with Jason Reynolds. And so he was kind enough he read Me, Moth, enjoyed it. He did my launch event, which really I think really helped us just gain momentum slowly. And yeah, it was very surprising. Everything that happened with Me, Moth, I was in shock most of the time.
Really?
Yeah, I really was when I got the call from my publicist that I was a National Book Award long list, I was teaching. So I had my phone off. They called me 10 times because I was like, oh, this is my teaching time. I don't have my phone on. I turned my phone on. I thought someone had died. I didn't know what had gone on. And so then they were like, Amber, this happened. I was in shock. I wasn't expecting it. So it was such an experience. And then for the Coretta Scott King Award, they tricked me again. They were like, oh, we need to do a editorial meeting on Sunday. We usually don't. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, I'm free. And then it was the Coretta Scott King board. And they were like, congratulations. So I think that everything I got, I'm just so grateful for it. I'm grateful for the readers. I'm grateful for the process. And I think that with the amount of rejection I got before I got published, I wasn't expecting that kind of welcome into publishing.
Okay, well let's back up a little bit. The amount of rejection you got before publication, what was that like?
That was rough. I think that, I mean, even getting an agent for me was really hard. I think I got rejected over 200 times from agents over the course of writing 2 different books. And then when I did get an agent, my first 3 books died on submission. And so Moth was actually a book where I was like, I don't even care anymore. I'm going to write what I want. And ended up being the book that sold, but still it only got 1 offer. It wasn't like um all this excitement around like people talk about going to auction and things like that. And so I was just happy to get published. And when Liz Sabla called and said that at Fywell and Friends and said, I really enjoyed this book, I just knew that she understood me as a writer. And I think this is our 5th book together, The Leaving Room. So it was just, I feel really grateful for how everything happened, but it was very surprising to me.
Okay, so this is something I don't think I didn't expect to hear, like, given all of the awards and accolades that you, destined for that outcome, still had to do all of the struggle and go through all of that rejection. Um, did that beat you up ego-wise, or was there something in you that's like, "No, I know I can do this"?
I think that I come from a poetry background, so adult poetry. So rejection is a huge part of that. Like the poetry market is much smaller than fiction. And so I think I was prepared for the amount of rejection. I don't think I realized that you can be excellent um and get that amount of rejection. I think that I knew that I was writing good things, and to still get rejected was a bit surprising to me. But that's the market. That's just like it's a opposite of, it's still a market, right? It's still something that has to be sold and what they believe they can sell and all that aspects come in. But um, yeah, it was a process. I don't think I ever got down in the sense, because I mean, I was still a professor and I loved teaching at the time. I still love teaching, but it was one of those things where I still had something else to focus on, right? It's like I'm a professor first. I'm teaching my students. I know that there's a lot of difficult things my students are going through. So like the publishing aspect was always like there, and I was always working on it. But I guess it was a distraction to also be teaching. So I just decided I was just going to keep going and
Yeah.
see what happened. And thankfully, it ended up okay. But it definitely was a struggle at first. I definitely wasn't one of those people who's like, yeah, got all these offers from agents, and then my first book sold. That was not my experience.
Not mine, not even close. All right, so was the shift with Me Moth, you decided, "I'm going to write only what interests me," like, write for yourself first? Was that what changed?
I think it was that I had written some things in prose and I had written some fantasy, and I was a poet through and through, right? And so I knew there were novels in verse, and I was like, I'm just going to write one and see what happens. I'd read plenty. I loved Jacqueline Woodson's Brown Girl Dreaming. I loved Long Way Down. And I thought maybe I could, establish myself in that voice. And that I was like, "Oh, maybe because it's poetry, it'll feel easier." For the record, writing in verse is much harder than writing in prose. You've got so few words to get a whole story across. But it really was that this story came to me very quickly. And it also was right after my grandfather had passed away, who was always like rooting for me. And so I I kind of wrote a book that uh I thought he would like, as a man who grew up in, South Carolina, moved to DC. Um, he taught me so much about like my culture and hoodoo and things like that. And so I just wrote a book really about him, and then also the indigenous aspect in my book. The other main character in Memoth is Navajo, and my cousins are Navajo. So it was just adding a lot of my family culture to the story, and really trying to investigate what does it feel like to be a minority, being Navajo, being Black in these primarily white spaces, and how do we see each other, and how can we have conversations together. It was something I really wanted to talk about.
Absolutely, because, I mean, that was your growing up,
Yes, yeah. I went to
right?
I think there were, like, maybe in our whole school, 20 Black people. Like, it was not very diverse, and I think that, yeah, it was definitely a process, and it was also one of those things where, um, I definitely had a lot of this was before we were talking about diversity, right? So there were a lot of microaggressions that I don't think that my teachers purposely did, but like a lot of them, a lot of assumptions about what I would like or who I was. And even then, I shout out to librarians. It was like my school librarian. I like had lunch in the library, like even though you weren't supposed to, like who also made sure that there were as many diverse books in my library as possible because it wasn't something they were thinking about, and I was like an avid reader. So yeah, it's difficult to grow up in a space where you're othered, even if you don't want to be. So that was a bit of an experience.
And this librarian in a time when, like, finding diverse books,
Right.
that was no small
No,
thing. I
and
mean,
that
it's even now, it's still
back.
not, the ratios are off
Yep.
so significantly, but back then,
Even more so. Like she must have been checking everything because like every book that had any kind of diverse character, she was like, Amber, take it. And I think she had a really good understanding of like what like diversity in the sense of experience, mental health, everything that I was interested in that was different from what we were necessarily reading and in school at the time. So it was a good, that was my happy place. Reading was always a place where I found a lot of comfort. Yeah.
yeah, and you're still quite a very prolific reader, yeah?
Yeah, probably read about 150 books a year now. Probably a little more now that I don't teach. I have a bit more time, but I love all books. Like yesterday, I was finishing up reading The Bluest Eye again, and then I
Ooh.
went to reading a mafia romance. I don't know why. It just felt like felt right at the time. So
Yeah,
I,
there's not enough mafia romances in
sometimes
the world.
need a little, it's almost like it's like when you watch like a rom-com and then you
Mhm.
watch like what people would consider like a feature film where you're checking out, you're looking at the cinematography and all this, and then the rom-com is just fun. And it's nice to just have fun in that reading. So I try to read a little bit of everything. Which is it's like my it's great. It's great. So I don't have to worry about if there's a good TV show. I'm just like, there's a book series I'm in the middle of. I can read that. So it's good.
Yeah. Are there any, writers, working today that particularly influence you or that you resonate with?
I feel like I resonate with I really love Jacqueline Woodson's work.
Mhm.
I really love I just finished reading for the second time the fifth season series. I really love high fantasy. It's something that one day I'd like to get into. But I just for me, I love any writer that is working at the edge of their talent in the sense that I mean that they are challenging themselves. I can tell in the text. Like they're not resting on their laurels. Like they're trying something completely different, whether it's form, whether it's style. I find that beautiful because I know that they're constantly like, you know, pushing themselves. So I like authors who do different things. And so sometimes I discover an author and I like their first book and then I read the next one. It's very different, but I'm like, wow, I still love this because it's so different from what I was expecting. It's so interesting that you can change that kind of thing. So I'm always finding uh new favorite authors and across genre. Yeah.
Okay. Is that what you do in your own career? Constantly look, "Okay, I haven't done this before," trying to challenge yourself? Is that you too?
I think yes. Yes. I'd like to be an author. I know that career-wise, this isn't what a person who's building your career tell you. They say, "Okay, stay in one niche. That's your thing." But then I get bored, and if I'm bored, I'm not challenging myself. And so I think that all my books have something very different about them. When I wrote Gone Wolf, I was like, "Okay, I've already put several books out in verse. Let's see if I can write in prose. Let's see if that works." And so I think that for me, it's the challenge and the process of writing is so much a part of the creative aspects. And you learn something from every book that you write, as you know. And so you just bring that to the next book and say, okay, well, how can I improve on that? So I think that for the Leaving Room specifically, we got a review that said has Southern Gothic elements. And I was like, that's really great that you knows that because I'm working on an adult Southern Gothic novel right now. And so like it's like you see the influence. It's like those sparks were there. And then I was like, wait, I love this Southern Gothic aspect I'm having in here. What if I wrote a Southern Gothic novel? You know what I mean? And so it really does grow out of the thing that you were just working on, for me at least.
Yeah. No, absolutely, absolutely. Are you that way in life as well, where you want to try new things, challenge yourself? Does that extend beyond your writing?
I think I live on 40 acres of land in Virginia. So I'm considered what you would call a homebody, but, like, when I find something I like, I kind of get addicted to it. For example, a couple years ago, my dog, my soul dog passed away, and I was thinking I needed to get new a new pet, but then I was like, I don't think I'm ready." And so I ended up getting bees. So now I keep bees.
Okay.
And I have 4 hives, and I'm obsessed with them. I talk to them, I, like, sing to them, and so, like, now everyone knows, like, if you get Amber started talking on bees, she will not stop, and that made me so interested in the process of, collecting honey, and then I got a degree in herbalism. So, like, it just kind of, like, I follow my curiosity. I try to let myself follow my curiosity, and that always lands me somewhere interesting or different. But I'll have to get we just had a bee harvest. I'll have to get you some honey. I'll have to mail some to you.
I'd in a heartbeat, I would be all over that. Um, and so, okay, is that then it? So you discover something, you're like, now I need to learn everything about it. And then that, of course, fuels your writing and your
Yep.
creativity. What is lingering out there for you as a curiosity that you are just starting to explore or wanting to explore?
I watched Sinners, which I'd watched, like, films by him before, but something about that got me very interested in not screenwriting, but how a screenplay is, like, written and then put onto the page. So I have been collecting screenplays the last 6 months and reading them for fun because it's so interesting. It's like, how do we have this just, like, screenplays are so thin compared to novels, right? And then I'm like,
Mhm.
how does it create into this, like, masterpiece on screen? So yeah, I've got, like, 30 screenplays I've collected that I'm just reading. I don't have any intention right now to write a screenplay, but I'm just very interested in that process of creating. So right now I'm really into film, I guess. I've been watching a lot of film. I just watched all the Alien versus Predator and Alien movies because I'd never watched them. Um, it's I don't know, it's so random, but it's been really interesting, which has got me thinking about horror and could I write horror and is Southern Gothic horror, or what are the aspects of Gothic that are different from horror? And so those are the conversations happening um in my head right now. A lot of sci-fi, horror, gothic things, yeah.
Okay. I'm very eager to see what comes of that,
What co
literally.
Who knows? Yeah,
Who knows? Who knows? But that's the great thing,
yes.
is that what happens on the other end of who knows, is just there's a universe of possibility, and I always think if you have one art, you almost always have other
Oh,
art.
yes.
I don't think any artist is
I
limited to this one thing.
Exactly, I agree 100%.
Alright, what are your arts?
Oh, wow. I shoulda known that was the follow-up. Uh,
I know, gotcha.
got me. Uh, I was a dancer for most of my life. I'm still a dancer, I guess, but I don't dance, like, professionally or competitively anymore. So dance is a huge part of my life. So an interesting thing about me is if I am stuck on a book, I'm just probably going to dance, and I dance my way through it. I was a contemporary dancer, it's a huge part of who I am still, and so movement is a huge part of my process still. So, like, if you watched me in my office, my friends make fun of me. I you can if I'm frustrated apart, I'm standing up, I'm turning on a song, I'm moving, I'm sitting back down. So movement and dance is a huge part. That's the artistry I'm very interested in. Um, and I think I don't have much talent when it comes to drawing or anything like that, but I love art. I just am obsessed with it. I have a whole like wall right here of artists and I love finding them. And so I spend a lot of time looking at like indie artists, stalking them on TikTok and everything and trying to get original pieces before they blow up and they become too expensive. So I just really love art as well.
Yeah. So if we go back a little bit into a little earlier Amber McBride life, when you were a pre-med
Yeah.
student, and then you got in a car crash
Hmm.
and ended up in the hospital for a bit, and you're like, "I don't think pre-med is for me."
Yeah, it was weird. It's weird. I think that I'd always at first when I was young, I wanted to be a vet, and then it became pre-med or doctor. Is that I always wanted to help people. I find a lot of value. My a lot of my therapist would have something to say about this, but a lot of my value is in like what I can do for other people. So like I like cooking for other people, I like helping other people. And so for me, being a doctor was like, well, that's perfect. I was pretty good at the sciences. It wasn't an issue for me. And then when I ended up being in a hospital, I realized this feels so sterile, so different than what I was hoping it would be. And that time I had already started taking more English classes and creative writing classes for fun. Because I came into college with a lot of extra credits. And so then I realized I was like, I don't think I want to be a doctor. I don't think I could handle losing a patient. Like there were aspects of it I just had not, as a teenager, just in, college, thought deeply on. And that's when I had to call my parents, be like, hey, so I want to switch my major, which was an interesting conversation. Yeah.
Yeah. They received it well, or were they like, really? So poetry, huh?
Poetry. I mean, they knew I was a poet because I was like writing poetry and gifting it to people and things like that. I think that just like any parent, specifically of a minority, like you definitely want your kids to be successful, right? And arts are not a guaranteed success, in any way, shape, or form. And so I think that they were nervous about it. But my mother is very type A personality, and my parents are very supportive. And so my mom was like, "If you show me your 10-year plan, we'll keep paying for college and we'll support you through this." And so I did. I wrote out a 10-year plan. We worked on it together, and um, I switched my major that next week, and I haven't looked back. It was the best decision I've ever made. Yeah.
I did have to laugh at, you know, in your backstory, which is the podcast right before this one, for anyone who has not heard it, just scroll and find the very previous one. You gave us the opening lines for your sixth grade poem.
Yeah.
And I also wrote poetry in sixth grade, but my level of poetry was more like, roses are red, violets are blue, Jack is cute, and so am I, right? Like I was terrible. I thought I was okay. And I'm listening to your opening words, and they are electric.
Thank you.
And you're sixth grade.
I don't
And
I think that, like, poetry I talk about all the time, I don't even know, like, it just happened, and so I don't even sometimes I as a extremely spiritual person, sometimes I don't even think my younger words were my own. I think they were coming from somewhere else or something else, but, like, it definitely it felt like home, and I go back and look at them now, and I obviously critique them because I'm like, "Oh, wow, that's very rhymey. It's a lot," but it's something where it's like I've never forgotten it. It's like it's ingrained, it's memorized. So it's something that's very, very special to me.
do you have any advice for young poets who wonder, could I do anything with this poetry that I write?
Mm, yes. The answer is yes. I think that poetry, there's such a stigma around poetry, of there's like elitism around it of, oh, uh, it's inaccessible, right? And I think that I would tell young people just to keep writing because there's always someone who's getting something from your words, whether you're sharing it on a blog, whether you're giving it as a gift, whether you're just keeping it for yourself and what it's doing for you. I think that um, that's the beautiful thing about poetry is that there's so many different types, there's so much nuance, there's so many different aspects of it. And I come from the vein of people who like I think a lot of things are poetry. I think there's a lot of people who don't think that rap music is poetry, and I do. And so I think that I would encourage young people to just explore. And there's so many interesting poets. I think the problem is we teach poetry wrong. Like it doesn't make sense to start with Shakespeare. Like nobody likes Shakespeare when they're young. Like you don't start liking Shakespeare until you start understanding why he's so interesting, right? Like why in his time this was so new. But I think we should be starting with like what's wrong with TikTok poets? What's wrong with these poets who are more about spoken word that could access students better? So we could build up that repertoire with poetry, that comfortability with poetry. So yeah, explore. There's so many spoken word poets that are brilliant. Mahogany Brown, like there are just so many poets who are doing amazing things. So exploring that. And we have the internet. So you have access to so much, which I didn't. Like I didn't know what was going. Like we didn't have that when I was growing up.
Yeah. So Yeah, you're right, it just wasn't, and I don't think it is well taught
No.
much of the
Mhm.
time. I and Shakespeare is theater and meant to be performed.
Formed, exactly. And then it's that aspect to be really into something outside of like a sport or something. I don't know if it makes you quote cool. And I think that when I do school visits, I think the best way I show that is like I just geek out. I'm like, yeah, this is the thing I'm really excited about. I am trying to calm myself down. And I think that excitement allows young people to be excited as well. That you're allowed to be super excited about things you love, no matter what it happens to be.
When you talk to young people, what is your message to them?
I think it's authenticity in themselves. I think there's so much. I think social media is amazing. The internet's amazing because you have access to so much information, but it's also this platform that makes you constantly compare yourself to other people, right? And I think I can't imagine growing up young right now and
Yeah.
the amount of critique that you're under. And so for me, I'm always just like, you're who you're supposed to be. And your only job is to be like, what do I enjoy that doesn't hurt other people? What do I want to, invest my time in? And that makes you cool. And it's as simple as that, right? Have a personality. You don't have to adopt other people's personalities as your own. You don't have to love everything that your favorite artist loves. You're allowed to disagree with some things they do. Um, yeah, and that nuance of that, I think that I think a lot of young people I talk to see things as like, oh, this is good or bad. And it's like, there's a whole gray area right there. That's fine to be in. Like, it's okay um, to be in the middle, be lukewarm about something. And so, yeah, talking to them about that kind of stuff. It's always surprising me how much young people want to talk about life. You talk about your work and they'll be interested in that, but more than anything, they just want to talk about like life, what's difficult and um what they're having a hard time with, which I feel very, very privileged to be a person that they feel like they can talk to.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's something really unique about when you have the opportunity as an author to stand up in front of young people. Jewel Parker Rhodes describes it as sacred space.
Oh, yeah. It does feel like that because I know you've done so many as well. Is that when you walk in, the first thing is I love young people is that they don't care about the list of awards you just got. They're on vibes immediately. If they don't like your vibe, they're like, no, thank you. Um, so I think it also forces us as writers to to remember who we were when we were younger, right? And I think that act of empathy, even for us, is so I don't know, it helps us see our inner child as well. I just find it like as a whole community, it's so rewarding. Being able to be in those spaces. And it's my favorite thing. That's the thing I've been able to do more now that I'm not a full-time professor. And it's been one of the best things about the being a full-time writer is just the amount of young people I get to interact with.
Are there any moments, any interactions with a young person that are particularly poignant or that will always stay with you?
There's 2 I was when We're All So Good at Smiling came out, which is a book about clinical depression, and the title, We're All So Good at Smiling, this idea again of like we all are smiling and we're not talking about how we're feeling or anything like that. We're all pretending. And so, I was doing a school visit in Baltimore, through the library system, and it was a great group of kids, and then this one kid who was quiet the whole time raised his hand, and he said, "Why did you do the title like that?" And I was like, "Well, why do you think? Like, what do you think?" And he was like, "I think it's because we're all just acting." And I was like, "I think you got it completely right." And I turned to go talk to the next person, and this particular student got up and like ran out of the class or out of the auditorium because he was crying. And I just thought about like I'm getting teary thinking about it. Um, that space of like how much emotion must be in a young person with so much happening, right? And saying, yeah, we're all pretending. We're all having trouble. And I got to talk to the kid afterwards, and then we're both just crying. And then the space of like,
Mhm.
it's okay to cry. Like crying is it's a natural thing, was a big one for me. And then when I went on book tour for Onyx and Beyond last October, it was my first full book tour because before I couldn't go on one because teaching is right in the middle, right? And so I went on book tour and I got to go, I think it was like 10 schools in a week we went to. And there was the one school, it was like the final school in Richmond, Virginia. So it's like close to where I am. We'd already gone like to the West Coast and everything. And the kids were so excited. And the teacher had made them these shirts. On the back, it said author security. And
Oh.
it was the cutest thing I'd ever seen, and they were my 3 like, they were the 3 people who apparently when they read the book were so excited that the teacher and the librarian had made these shirts for them, and they were like their job was, like, to take me around everywhere I had to go, and I was just like to see kids this excited about just an author, not, like, someone else coming, I was just really touched, and so I have so many photos of us posing with those, uh, author security on the back, T-shirts. That was a really great moment too.
Oh, that is the
I
best. That is the
I
best.
know, again, where I was like, don't cry from happiness," and, these kids are so excited, this is not the time. But they're just it's great, and then also just the amount of, I don't know, I think that middle school kids are a different breed. I think we all know, it's like high schoolers are, like, too cool for school sometimes, and that's fine. Middle schoolers are so honest but also, like, so not bought in by anything unless they like you, that I love that that's such a cool age, and so going on tour for, Onyx and Beyond, which was a middle grade book, was really fun because it was a book that was inspired by my dad, and so we got to talk about, like, what was it like growing up in the 70s in DC, and, like, they had so many cool questions about, like one was like, "Did your dad know Martin Luther King?" I was like, "No, no, he didn't, but that's a great question." So it's just the interactions are so, I don't know, just rewarding, like you would know. They just feel so good. And it's like recharging. So then when you go back to write, you're like, "Ah, okay. I remember why I'm doing
Yeah.
this."
Yeah, there's your
Yep.
reason. A lot of your books are inspired by ancestors or family, or your books tend to be really close to your heart. Is that accurate?
Yes, the jumping off point is always very, very close for me. I think I'm good at, like, detaching for story on, like, what happens in it, but usually, all the books I can think of, yeah, were inspired by something. So, like, Gone Wolf, I started the idea for that after the Unite the Right rallies here in Charlottesville, of that idea of, like, what does what happens when history repeats? What happens if we don't tell history correctly? That question. So then I like investigate that. I have clinical depression, so We're All Scared of Smiling looks at that. Me Moth was like an kind of like a very long eulogy to my grandfather and that idea of like how he connected so many cultures with our families. So yeah, it's always a jumping off point for me of where I decide to start the book, and then I let the characters do their thing.
Sure, sure. I do want to talk. I just about how do you all of these books. This is what I've got. So you have Me Moth,
Yeah.
that comes out in 2023. You had 2 books, so We Are All So Good at Smiling. That's a school library journal best book of the year. You had Gone Wolf, that's your middle grade debut novel. That's receives the LA Times Book Prize and is a best book of the year from Publishers Weekly and Kirkus. You had 3 books releasing in 2024, and all of these have received these significant accolades and awards and honors. And I wonder, there's authors will respond to that in a couple of ways, and some get that imposter syndrome,
Mm.
right? Like at any minute they'll figure out, I have no
I'm
clue what I'm doing.
yeah.
And some authors are like, I worked so hard to get here, and they just are like feeling I earned this.
Mm.
And where are on that scale are you?
Such a good question. I think that, I don't think I have issues with imposter syndrome, mainly because I know how difficult it was to first get published. So I was like, I put in that work. But I also don't feel like I earned it because I think that there's so many factors into getting your book reviewed, right? Like it's who's reading it. Do you have a person who gets it? All this, right? And so I think that there's plenty of authors who I think should have more accolades and stars and things like that, right? But I think that I feel grateful, just grateful because I think the one thing about these when you get a lot of accolades is that your book does get into more classrooms. It does get into more places and I want my books to be accessible to young people. So I feel extremely grateful for that. But I think I sit right once again in that gray area of I don't think I deserve it. I don't think I don't deserve it. I think I just feel a lot of gratitude and I hope that as I keep working hard, I just get better and figure out my voice and explore more voices more. But that's such a good question because I've never really thought about it. It's like the success is weird. It's because it's like success to one person is not success to another person, right? Because I think
Yeah.
that like I've never hit the New York Times bestseller list, which I think for a lot of people is like a litmus for success, but I have gotten a lot of awards. Um, and so for me, like that's why it's the gray area. Is like I think being acknowledged and being in the conversation where your books are being talked about is the thing I feel really grateful for when it comes to being an artist.
Yeah. Um, I I think it's an interesting measure because I think very often we tend to measure ourselves by what we're not,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like, I have never won any of the awards that you have won. And so, but I have hit the New York Times list. And you're like, I've never hit the New York Times list, but then I could, plaster a wall with awards. And, and how do you think about that in terms of, if we have authors listening or aspiring authors about measuring yourself, especially in a social media world where it's so easy to do comparisons, how would you speak to that author about the way they should think of themselves?
I think it's once again is that the way I look at it is if we are I don't want to be too precious with the idea of like, oh, you should just be happy you're published because we do have to make a living. We do need to do those things, right? But I do think that like for me, it was that if my books were getting to my readers, I felt like I was winning. Everything else was like icing on the cake, right? And I think that this rings true more for me in young adult because they're babies. They're our babies. They're our next generation, right? We're putting things out that we hope will help them develop empathy, get interested in reading. And so I just feel happy about that. And I think that if you look at, like you said, you can compare yourself like based on other people. So people will look at me and they'll be like, Amber, you put out like 7 books in this amount of time. I was like, yeah, I also had a mental breakdown and burnt out. Like, these are not healthy things necessarily. And so I think for me, I had to go through that. I had to learn like it doesn't matter how many books you're putting out, like it doesn't necessarily it's not your worth. And so for me, slowing down has become a huge thing. The fact that I only have 1 book coming out next year and 1 book this year was like, I was like, am I doing something wrong? You know what I mean? And so I think that it is finding what's authentic to you. And like you said, you've been on the New York Times bestseller. I have awards. That doesn't mean that if that was reversed, it would be any less important. You know what I mean? And that's the thing.
Or if neither of them?
Exactly. It's like you write a book and you have a reader who connects with it. That's the win. And all these other things. I actually had a conversation with my mom about this. And she was like, "What's it feel like to like almost hit the pinnacle of what awards are your first book?" And I was like, "I just can't look at it like that because what is the pinnacle of what you're going to do, right? Like, is it that you have access to more classrooms? Is that the thing? So like being a National Book Award finalist makes more schools ask me to go there. That feels like a win to me, right? So if that means that none of my other books do that, I'm still winning because I'm still getting to interact with these young people. So yeah, just ignoring that. And also get offline. Probably don't. I don't read reviews unless it's like, from the review people like, School Library Journal, people like that, that my editor sends me. I don't go looking for them. Um, Reviews are none of my business. I try not to see them. If I accidentally, sometimes people will tag you in like a 1-star review for no reason. And you're like, why?
Why'd you do that?
And I just like move on. And I also try not to be online too much. I have a flip phone. So when I don't have anything during the day, I usually have a flip phone instead of my smartphone. So I'm not so attached to, oh, someone got this book deal or someone did this or they got this accomplishment. I just keep your eyes on your own paper. Is very, very helpful. Harder said than done, but helpful.
But important.
Yes, and important.
Important to do. I'm going to ask you to put on your professor hat for just a minute and answer a nearly impossible question. What makes a great poem?
Wow.
Is it you know it when you see it? Or is it like, if you really want to be great at this, do this?
I think that I have two answers. I think what makes a great poem for young people is very different that makes a great poem for a person who is studying the craft and wanting to publish in that aspect, right? I think for me, what makes a great poem for young people is something they're proud of. That's it. That's my only thing I'm judging. We can talk about line breaks later. We can talk about alliteration later. All those things you can learn. If you become proud of the thing you create, that is the most difficult thing. Like as writers, we can say that when we finish something and we're proud of it, like doesn't really matter what anyone else says, right? Because you know that you created something you're proud of. So that's the kind of confidence I try to instill in young people when they're writing poetry. For adults, it's more of, have you read 100 poetry collections? Do you understand why you did that line break? Do you understand if you're going to break rules? Do you understand why you're doing it? And then also, are you actively trying to create your own voice as opposed to copying other voices, which is something I see a lot in younger people in MFA programs, is that they'll see a Maya Angelou and be like, oh, I want to write like that. But they haven't figured out their voice within that, right? You can be influenced by a lot of things, but you don't want that to become um, your voice. You want to be yourself. And I think in general, every good poem to me makes you think about it after you read it.
Yeah.
It sits with you a bit longer. Um, you think about like Mary Oliver poems are so what people would say, quote, same with Maya Angelou, it's simplistic, right? They're not like doing these allusions to grand things usually, but the simplicity of the language hits on something that's so true about humanity that we quote them constantly, we sit with them, they make us feel things. What is the one Wild Geese, which it says, you do not have to be good. Like there's just such this idea of like goodness, right? And like what does that mean? And I think that I think the best poems hit at something about our humanity and make us think about it for a long time, and that's why we go back to those poems. Yeah, that one of my favorite poems I can think of is Terrence Hayes' Lighthouse, or Lighthead's Guide to the Galaxy, from his poetry collection Lighthead. Um, and it starts with this idea. It goes like, brothers and gentlemen of the state, I'm here because I could never get the hang of time. And like, it's very formal, right? And by the end, he addresses the writer or the reader. He says, brothers and sisters, when you spend your nights out on the limb, there's a chance you will fall in your sleep. It's like this transition in the time of this poem where we're just like we formally know each other. And then through this list of things, suddenly we're brothers and sisters, and we're afraid of the same things. We're afraid of this time, what we're going to become. That poem, I remember when I first read it, I think I like threw the book. I was like, how did you do that? Like, how is possible? And I read it when I was in grad school for the first time, and I was like, I'm never going to write like that. I'm never going to be able to do that. But yeah, those kinds of poems, those ones that make you be like, wow, I'm feeling
Yeah.
things. Yeah.
Well, and you're right. You're not going to do that poem because that poem was done, but then you do you.
Right.
And that's the
That's the
voice.
voice, finding your voice and sitting in it and being comfortable in it.
Let's talk about this book you have coming
Right.
up, The Leaving Room, coming October 14th.
14th, yes.
All right. Can you just tell us a little bit about it, please?
Yes. So The Leaving Room is about a girl named Gospel who's a keeper of something called the leaving room, which is a room that all young people have to phase through before they pass away. And essentially, she has to follow a set of 5 rules, and she usually follows them. She starts breaking a few of them, and then as that happens, the leaving room starts to glitch. A girl named Melody arrives, and then the story kind of unfolds from there. But it's a book about what happens in the moments after we die. I wanted to take it away from religion. Like, whatever happens, if you're religious after that, that's great. But like in those first moments, because when you think of kids, you think of people who are so very alive, right? The idea of them being have passed away is very difficult to like kind of grapple with.
Okay. It is the cover. Readers, if we're not able to put it up on screen, and I hope we are, the cover is magnetically beautiful. I
Rich
think it's one of the most
Diaz is the cover artist. Brilliant man.
oh, absolutely gorgeous. And how can our listeners connect with you or find out more about you?
Well, my website is amber-mcbride.com. And then also I'm on social media at AMBS, AMBS McBride on TikTok, Threads, and Instagram.
Okay, wonderful. Well, Amber, I want to thank you so much for being part of our podcast today. I think I could just ask you questions for hours more.
Thank you for having me.
All right, in closing, every one of us, we all have a backstory. It's the life that happens to us before we begin happening to life. It molds you and forms you into the amazing person you are, which means your story will always be important. Get out there and tell your story. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening to Backstory. If you'd like to enjoy more episodes, visit us at storycon.org/backstory. That's StoryCon.org/backstory.